We welcome in the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Matt.
Always. I was thinking about this. This is your 10th NBA Finals as commissioner.
Wow.
How did a simple game of basketball turn into a global sensation? It's 1946, New York City. A group of basketball fanatics come together and create something extraordinary in the NBA. With 30 teams across the US and Canada, it's the go-to place for basketball stars to shine. The Basketball Association of America, which later became the National Basketball Association, started in 1946. Teams like the Boston Celtics, Chicago Stags, and New York Knicks were among the first 11 clubs. Right from the start, it was clear that the BAA was a hit with fans and players alike. When the BAA merged with another major association, the NBL, it transformed basketball into what we now know as the NBA. The league started with an impressive 17 teams, and since then it's been growing and impressing us all. The NBA has its share of challenges in the beginning. It had to compete with sports leagues like baseball and football for national TV contracts. But the NBA kept going, and eventually it became one of the most famous pro sports leagues in the world. One big reason for its success was the rise of black players. In 1950, Chuck Cooper became the first black player to join the NBA when he signed with the Boston Celtics. This move broke down racial barriers in sports. The NBA's golden era was in the 1950s and 60s. This was when legendary teams like the Boston Celtics and the Minneapolis Lakers ruled the courts. The Celtics won a whopping 11 championships during this time, with star players like Bill Russell and Bob Cousy. The Lakers weren't far behind, securing 5 championships and boasting stars like George Mikan and Jerry West. The NBA continued to grow during the expansion era from the 1960s to the 80s. 10 new teams joined, bringing the total to 23. This expansion brought new markets, demographics, and excitement to the league. It also saw some of the greatest players in NBA history rise to fame, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan. In the 21st century, the NBA's continued to evolve. It added new teams and expanded internationally, with games played in Europe and China. Today, the NBA is home to some of the most talented players in the world, like LeBron James and Stephen Curry. The BAA had set a 60-game schedule, and teams made the postseason based on how they played on the court, not how many fans they drew. This was different from the Midwest Basketball Conference, which let a Chicago team into the playoffs, even though they played fewer games and had a worse record than a Detroit team, just because the Chicago team would draw more fans. Everyone in the BAA and NBA now plays the same number of games. There have been some exceptions, like a play-in format if teams were tied for a playoff spot, or sometimes a game gets cancelled and can't be rescheduled, like when the Celtics and Pacers only played 8-1 games because of the Boston Marathon terrorist attack. But having teams play the same number of games against the same teams shows a level of fairness and consistency that wasn't seen before the NBA. The BAA also made sure its teams didn't play exhibition or barnstorming games against other leagues. At the time, this seemed crazy because those games made a lot of money, but by keeping its product and players in-house, the BAA had more control. They also had consistent rules, unlike many early leagues where the home team could set the rules, creating unfair advantages. Some teams even had different sized courts or hoops of different heights. The BAA also stopped its teams from leaving, though they sometimes let it slide if it benefited the league. Teams could only trade with each other, and players under BAA contracts could only play for the BAA. By sticking to these rules, the BAA made a better product and quickly started to beat out other leagues. By its second season, the BAA poached the Baltimore Bullets from the ABL, and by the third season it got the Kautsky's, Lakers and Pistons from the NBL. The NBL even started talking to the BAA about merging. The BAA had one more unusual rule that team owners didn't like. Teams couldn't be named after sponsors. Most leagues had teams named after companies, but not the NBA. So when the Kautsky's joined the NBA, they had to change names and become the Indianapolis Jets. In 1949, the BAA had replaced the NBL as the best basketball league, but the NBL still had the best players, so they decided to merge for the 1949-50 season. Teams like the Nationals, Royal Hawks, Blackhawks, Packers, Redskins and Nuggets joined the NBA. The league also got rid of the Jets and replaced them with the Indianapolis Olympians. That season, the league had 17 teams, the most it had until 1974, when the NBA added the New Orleans Jazz. The 49-50 season stirred up a lot of problems that the league didn't like. The smaller markets of the NBL caused big issues for the bigger BAA markets. Plus, having a league that stretched from Boston to Denver was just too much in the 40s. So the next season, the NBA kicked out most of the NBL teams that had joined the season before, only letting the Nationals, Royals and Blackhawks stay. All three teams are still around, but they've moved since then. For example, the Rochester Royals are now the Sacramento Kings. The Tri-Cities Blackhawks are now the Atlanta Hawks, and the Syracuse Nationals are now the Philadelphia 76ers. The league kept a small number of teams from 1950 until the 1960s, and even after losing teams in Washington, Baltimore and Indianapolis, they kept the league at just 8 teams. Not expanding too much has been another key thing for the NBA. Many early leagues tried to add as many teams as they could, but this made the league weaker. However, keeping just 8 teams sometimes meant that certain teams had too many good players, like the Boston Celtics in the 60s, who often had 8 to 10 Hall of Famers on their team. Though the NBA loves its consistency, it's not afraid of change. When the Pistons held the ball almost the whole game to beat the Lakers in 1918, the league came up with a solution. They added the 24-second shot clock. And when teams had too many good players and a rival league started up, the NBA started expanding again. They first tried to expand into Chicago in 1961 with the Packers, who later became the Bullets and moved to Baltimore. The real expansion era began in 1966 when the ABA announced it wanted to start a rival league. The NBA didn't want competition, but they knew players might leave their teams for more money and playing time, so they started expanding again. They chose Chicago again despite its history of unsuccessful teams. This time though, they found success with the Chicago Bulls. The NBA also started looking westward. Before, they only had 2 teams west of the Mississippi River, the Denver Nuggets, which lasted just 1 season, and the Lakers, who moved to Los Angeles in 1960. So starting in 1960, they began adding teams in the west, like in Seattle, San Diego, Phoenix and Portland. The ABA also looked at the west and put teams in cities like Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles and San Diego. The ABA was popular with fans because of its fast-paced games and new fan experiences, but it was unstable. Within a few seasons, most teams had moved or shut down. However, it still managed to hurt the NBA financially, and the NBA finally agreed to play exhibition games with the ABA. The ABA made the NBA change some of its ways, like adopting some fan experiences and the three-point line. But like many leagues, the ABA expanded too quickly, and by 1974 it was almost finished, just like the NBL before it. The ABA wanted to join the NBA, and the NBA decided to take teams from some markets, like the San Antonio Spurs, Indiana Pacers, Denver Nuggets and New York Nets. Even though fans want the league to expand to Europe and other cities, it might not be a good idea financially. The league has kept pretty much the same game and rules since it started. They've made updates when needed, but they've avoided adding silly things like a 4-point line. What's inspiring you to still watch the game? Share your perspectives in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Till next time, see you again.